So in this video, I'm going to make you aware of one of the biggest obstacles that you're going to face while scaling your agency from 0 to 30K per month. Now this obstacle is Sam Ovens, who's the founding father of consulting on the internet. He calls this the pendulum of doubt. And he says word for word that the road to success is covered in the blood of its victims. So the pendulum of doubt is something that you're going to face as a salesperson, and basically what it is, it's the emotions that you go through on winning streaks and losing streaks while taking sales calls with your prospects. And what happens is when you go on a losing streak or you go on a winning streak, you start feeling these emotions, right? And then where it really gets bad is when you start making decisions based on these emotions that you're feeling. Ray Dalio, who manages one of the biggest hedge funds, he says that emotion is the biggest threat to a good decision. Okay, so let me give you a little bit more context on the pendulum of doubt. So before we get into this, you have to understand how data works on a short time frame and a long time frame. I want to use this one example that I really like that really helps me explain this idea in a nice and simple way. So say that we have a coin and we flip this coin 10 times. Hypothetically, there's a 50% chance that it lands on heads, right? So a lot of people in sales, they think if they have a 10% conversion rate, it means that they should close one prospect every 10 calls. But that's like believing if I flip the coin 10 times, it would land on tails exactly 5. But that's not the truth. It might land on tails, maybe 1 or 2 times because it's not on a long enough data set. Whereas if I flip a coin 100 times, it's probably going to land on tails exactly, 50 to 52 times. But the problem is people start expecting these conversion rates to be true on a low time frame. So maybe you're new, maybe you just started taking sales calls, maybe you're already taking them already, but it's inevitable that you're going to go on losing streaks and winning streaks. So a lot of people will go into sales and for whatever reason, they think 10% is just in their mind, it's a healthy conversion rate. So they think that if they take 10 calls, it means that they're going to close 1 client. But then what happens is they take 10 calls and they close 0 clients and they get very emotional, and that emotion, it causes them to make decisions. So this decision might be changing their offer, changing their sales script, or even worse, changing their niche. And the only reason that they made that decision was because of the emotion that they felt from going on a losing streak in sales, where if they just, if they understood the pendulum of doubt and the effects that it causes, they probably would have taken another 10 calls and they could have closed 2 prospects. Right? Because those 10 calls, to some of you that might seem like a lot of sales calls, but in reality, that's a very small data set. So what ends up happening is when someone who's not aware of the pendulum of doubt, when they go on a losing streak in sales or a winning streak, and both of these are inevitable if you're taking enough sales calls. So maybe they just started taking sales calls, they've taken 6, 7 calls so far, and all of them were a loss, right? And by, the first couple of losses, they might have been feeling okay, but once they get to that 5th and 6th loss, they really start feeling this negative emotion. And that negative emotion, like Ray Dalio says, is a threat to decision making. And that negative emotion, it makes you want to make these decisions like switching niches, switching offers. But the problem is you're making that decision off negative emotion and not, a long data set where, you can make real decisions off data with real information instead of emotion. Now, this doesn't just happen with losing streaks. It actually happens with winning streaks as well. So let's say that, you take your first 5 sales calls and you close all 4 of them, right? And that can totally happen. But the problem is that's going to also give you the emotion of false confidence. And then you're going to also make decisions off that confidence. You might start looking at Lamborghinis. You might start, hiring someone to run ads for your agency. You might just start spending money aggressively because you have this false confidence that you can close 90% of prospects you get on the phone with. When in reality, you could take another 40 calls, could not close any of them, right? So this is how data set works, is you have to understand in sales that data is only true on a long enough time frame. So most people aren't even aware that the pendulum of doubt exists. And I want to give you guys a quote from Charlie Munger. He says, "All I want to know is where I'm going to die so I don't go there." And this is really profound because it means that, sometimes it's better to know what not to do than it is to know what to do, right? So that's why I'm making you guys aware of this pendulum of doubt, because I don't know how new you are to SMMA, but this is something that you are going to experience. In fact, I experienced this when I went on like an 8-call losing streak. And by that, that 7th and 8th call, my mind started playing tricks on me and I literally wanted to switch niches when I had no reason to switch niches except that I just, not close the prospect for 8 calls. But guys, and I was this close to switching niches and switching to an appointment setting offer because I'm booking like 30 to 50 calls a month. So I was like, hey, I might as well just go sell to agency owners because I was on a 7-call losing streak in the real estate niche. And it quickly became an excuse of, oh, my niche is saturated. But that thought was only a consequence of me being on a losing streak of 7 calls, which in reality isn't a lot of calls. And luckily I stuck with it, and the call after that I ended up closing and I snapped out of it, right? But that's a make or break moment for a lot of agency owners where they go on a long losing streak and they don't make it very far, and they get these emotions that come and they're very hard to control if you're not aware of them, and then they make decisions based off those emotions, and those decisions cause them to switch niches, switch scripts, switch offers, and the amount of money you make is congruent to the knowledge of your niche or your offer. So every time they switch, they're just resetting their progress. So it's a very bad decision to make, especially because it's based off emotion. Whereas if you just stick to it and you're aware of this, so you keep taking your sales calls, and I'm going to give you guys a really cool tool to combat this in a moment, but as long as you're aware of this and you stick with it at least 30 calls, that's going to give you more realistic data, right? So instead of just going on a 8-call losing streak, stick down, at least commit to taking 30 sales calls so you can make that decision off data instead of emotion. So now I'm going to give you guys a tool to combat this now that you're actually aware of it, and this tool is simply by using spreadsheets to log your emotions after every single sales call. So I'll actually link the spreadsheet that I use below. Just make sure to click file and make a copy. I'm going to explain to you guys how I use it. So what I do is it allows me to log every call. I put information like the date the call was taken, where the lead came from that call, the duration of the call, I leave a recording of the call, and then I write down my emotions of the call. And the reason I do this is so I can see the pendulum of doubt playing out real time, right? So say for example, after I've taken 30 calls, let's say I closed 3 prospects. Well, I can see a log of all 30 of those calls, so I can see where I went on a losing streak. So say for example, I went on a 10-call losing streak before closing 3 prospects. Well, I'm able to see that on the spreadsheet, and I'm able to see by, the 8th or the 10th call, I was getting very emotional, but because I'm aware of the pendulum of doubt, I stuck it out. And then I can see on the spreadsheet that after that big losing streak, I closed the prospect, right? Because I can see red, 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 green, because all the calls that I lose, I highlight red, all the calls that I win, I highlight green. So when you see this playing out real time on a spreadsheet, it gives you this reminder that the more no's you get and the more losing streaks that you're on, the closer you are to either closing a prospect or going on a very long winning streak, right? And the same can be true from if you're on a very long winning streak, it tells you, hey, don't get super cocky because a losing streak is around the corner, right? So what you have to understand is that the highs and lows of sales do not define you, but the averages do. So what I want you to do is stick to one niche, one offer, one sales script, one channel of outreach. And what I want you to do is I want you to take 30 sales calls, and no matter the outcome of those calls, I don't care if you lose 20 of them in a row, I want you to stick to all of those for at least 30 sales calls. Use the spreadsheet in the description, log everything like you're supposed to, and I promise you, after 30 calls, you'll be able to make a much more informed, data-driven decision instead of making a wrong decision off of emotion. Now, what these decisions might be is it might not even be switching niches, but the same is true for editing your sales script, right? You want to keep the same sales script, and you only want to make changes to it after you have a lot of data to go off, 30 calls. You can go back and watch your recordings. You can see the sales call from a third-person view, and you can say, hey, when I said that way, the prospect kind of flinched a little bit. Maybe I should say that a little differently. And you'll be able to see that if it's a reoccurring theme by watching all those 30 sales calls, and then you'll be able to make a data-driven decision on how to change your script, or if you need to change your offer, or worst case, you need to change your niche, but at least you're making that decision off data. So guys, whether you've faced it or not, these sales slumps are inevitable and they will happen to you. At least now you are aware of them, so you can use the tools to prepare yourself for them. So every time you're in a high or a low, even if you don't have all the data logged out yet, so let's say you've only taken your first 10 calls and they've all been a losing streak, I want you to remind yourself that there's gonna be highs and there's gonna be lows. low, and you're in one of the lows right now. But if you keep pushing through and you don't change your script, you don't change your niche, you're gonna reach a high. Another tip for combating these emotions is you have to understand that sales is like a sport. Professional athletes, before a big game day, they're gonna eat healthy, they're not gonna eat preservatives, they're not gonna eat sugar, they're gonna make sure they get 8 hours of, not just 8 hours of sleep, but 8 hours of high quality sleep. And then, before a big game, they might be watching footage of a previous game so they can see the game from a third person perspective and see what they need to adjust. So sales is the same way where, you don't, before sales calls, I don't eat sugar or preservatives within 48 hours of a sales call, because you'll notice it decreases your performance, but it makes you, it makes you more susceptible to making decisions off emotion. If you're eating healthy foods and you're getting good sleep, you can combat the emotions that come with the pendulum of doubt. As well as you should be watching all your sales calls. Set aside maybe a Sunday, maybe a Saturday where you just sit down for a couple hours and you watch your sales calls from a third person perspective. And you can do this for 30 calls and just take notes every call. Say, what did I do good? What did I do bad? How did the prospect react to this line? How did they react to my offer? How did they react to the price? And you're gonna have, 30 sets of notes after 30 calls, and you're gonna be able to see what's working and what's not based off a long set of data. And then you can really start making decisions that help you improve and, help you increase your sales conversion rate. So even if you are prepared to face the pendulum of doubt, they're gonna be tough the first couple of winning streaks and the first couple of losing streaks, but at least now you know and you're aware of it and you have the tools to combat it, to where with practice it will become normal, and you'll just be smooth sailing through 100 sales calls, through the ups and through the downs, to where if you take 100 sales calls, you're at least going to close 10 prospects. Even if you go on a 30 call losing streak, you will still close at least 10 prospects. And then after that 100 calls, imagine how much data you're going to get, and you can edit your script, you can edit your offer, you can edit your prices based off that data. And then the next 100 sales calls, you can close 20 or even 30 prospects. And even if you close 30 prospects out of 100, just remember, you can still go on a 30 call losing streak. This is the pendulum of doubt. I hope it was helpful. If you're looking for more sales advice, I actually just posted a live sales call, a 1-call close from a cold lead on my channel. So if you want to go check that out. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to be dropping more bangers on